My name is Joey. Could you go more in depth on what the LES, Lincoln Electric System, is doing for climate change?
Yes, so their decarbonization goal is on or before 2040, which is 10 years earlier than the 2050 goal by the other two electric utilities. Um, it is better, I guess I would say, than the Science-Based Targets Initiative. So in order to limit our warming by 1.5 degrees C, they're calling for net zero before 2050. So they are pushing, forward 10 years with that, which is definitely a very positive thing. And I will say that I'm currently sit on the LES board. So I'm speaking today in the voice of the a state climatologist and not necessarily an LES board member, but I will say that we are in the process of putting together a plan of how to achieve that net zero, because it's a tall order and it's not an easy task. So we're going to have to look strongly at, you know, wind, solar, these other forms, and making sure that it is sustainable, it's affordable, and it's also reliable. So I know that LES is taking all those factors into consideration. I have not yet seen a formal plan necessarily from LES. Um, we are in the process of looking for a new chief executive officer. So the look and feel of it might be different going forward, depending on how the new leadership would like to take that. So that's a little bit of what I'm aware of thus far. Um, I've seen the kind of the trend in coming off of fossil fuels and coming onto more renewables, and that is certainly, we're tracking downward in terms of getting off of fossil fuels. So that's the trend, but there's definitely some work to do in order to achieve that by 2040. So, but I would suggest, so the board meetings, we meet the second or third Friday, third Friday of every month. Ken is often there. You can join and make public comments. You can look at the board meeting minutes. So I would suggest, if you've got commentary or want to be a part of this process, you are more than welcome to join virtually or in person. So thanks for your question.
Hi, my name is Marissa. I'm a sophomore student at UNL. This question kind of goes more towards Louise. I think that the news that we receive in our generation has been really discouraging about the state of our climate, and you seem very hopeful about the future. And I'm just curious, like, what gives you that hope and inspiration moving forward?
Oh, thanks so much. That's such a good question. Um, Oftentimes, I go to a lot of climate conferences and we hear nothing but doom and gloom. You know, the world is ending, all of these crazy, terrible things. But then for me, what gives me hope is really the work that I do, being on the ground and knowing that all of us play a role in this. You see statistics on the news, right? You see how everything has to be renewable or clean by 2050. And I think that's important. But then you also see news of fossil fuels, and it almost feels like this never ending cycle of good things happen, bad things happen. But fact is, what we need truly to have to really achieve the goal of solving the climate crisis is to have hundreds and thousands of people doing projects like mine around the world that may go undocumented or not as well known, but are actually making impacts within their communities. So I think engaging within an ecosystem of communities, the people, the farmers, that gives me hope. And to see, like, I've had a very short lifetime, but I've seen forest cover stitching together over a span of 4 or 5 years. And that is just so rewarding. So I guess being on the ground and experiencing that and knowing that we're doing something, we're not completely sitting down on a couch looking at the news. We're getting up the next day, going out into the farm, planting trees, and doing something that's actually helpful. Um, it's really taking action and using your voice. And I really loved what you mentioned, that you could come to the meetings and make public comments. If you can, then absolutely do, because at least you're also getting your perspective into these dialogues and influencing them in a way.
And if I could just share a quick story. 3 years ago, the Lincoln Electric system was not on a path towards creating a zero carbon goal. And there was a young woman named Brittany McGuire. Some of you may know her. And she said for her 21st birthday, she wanted to get 21 people to show up at the Lincoln Electric System board meeting and asked for 100% renewable energy. She didn't quite make it. There were only 20 people who showed up, but after that meeting, suddenly the tone of the Lincoln Electric System changed, and they started on the path to decarbonization. So believe it when Martha says that you can make a difference, and Martha and Louise say that you individually can make a difference. Did you want to comment too, Martha? Okay.
Hello, I'm Emily. I have a question for Martha. I'm just wondering, on the Yale survey, how does our perception here in Nebraska compare to the rest of the nation?
Yes, for personal perceptions of climate change, there is a bit of a disconnect regionally. So if I didn't show the US map, and for that image in particular, the national average was about 60%. So Nebraska didn't differ significantly on that specific question. Some of the other questions that are asked, you do see where, in general, the east and west coast or the highly populated areas are more accepting or on board with climate change and action and mitigation efforts. Whereas in the central US, there's a bit of a deficit, I guess, in broad scale acceptance or talking about it. That's the image where we see the least percent of Nebraskans on board with. I think it's about 35% of us talk about this issue, although nationally it's less than 50%. So I would say that we lag behind nationally a bit, but not necessarily for all the questions. And there are certainly pockets that stick out locally for us where we have indigenous community populations. There is no convincing, there is a good perception of climate change and the need to act on it.
I want to thank everybody for these wonderful comments and speeches that you've been given and for this amazing turnout. My question is, and my thought is that there is a swath of environmental racism that goes through a lot of what we've been talking about. Specifically, closer to home, Omaha is the 9th worst city in the country for asthmatics. A lot of that has to do with the North Omaha coal-fired power plant, which creates enormous environmental health impacts on the community of North Omaha. I'm wondering, what is it that you think these people can be doing, or what can be done to maybe shut down that coal-fired plant to make North Omaha a healthier place? The Douglas County Health Department keeps track of life expectancies by zip codes. And in Douglas County, North Omaha, the life expectancy is 70.4 years. If you go 15 miles west of North Omaha, that life expectancy jumps to 84.3 years. So you gain 14 years of life by going 15 miles west because you don't have a coal-fired power plant in your backyard. What can be done about that? There's something wrong about, to me, I would think, about gaining 14 years of life going west from the community that is being overwhelmed by a coal-fired plant. What do you think, what would be your advice to students here, or your own thoughts on leveling the playing field there from an environmental health standpoint?
Okay, well, I've been involved in this issue since 2012. So actually, I wasn't planning to talk today at all. So yeah, sorry about that. But in any event, there is the management of OPBD has promised to retire that coal plant by 2026. It was actually supposed to be retired this year, but I'm part of a group that's working with OPBD management to get that coal plant retired. Actually, they're going to convert it to natural gas, which is still a fossil fuel, but doesn't have as much, produce as much particulate matter. So, but I do think it's an important point. But once again, the reason that originally was scheduled to retire was because of the fact that people showed up at OPBD meetings and spoke out and said, we want to see this happen. And people need to continue to be involved and make sure that they honor their promises. So anyone else do you want to make a comment?
No.
And I think we have time. We have time for maybe one more question.
One in the back.
Hi, I'm Jordan. I was wondering what we could do in our everyday lives to help stop climate change.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's such a good question. I think there's a lot of things that we can all do, whether it's pledging to commit, for example, reduce your plastic consumption, reduce meat consumption, or, well, even if you do reduce meat consumption, you can try carbon offsetting. You can also try planting trees or organizing within your community, or even signing up to volunteer for institutions that are doing something. I'm wondering, does anyone here have your own environmental or climate initiative that you're involved in somehow? Yeah, most people. I mean, these conferences are incredible because it brings people together with mutual common interests. So if you're not yet doing something, get to know people around you, get to know who's sitting next to you if you don't already, and see what they're doing, and figure out maybe you can help in a certain way that you weren't able to before. But in everyday life, there are so many things we can do. I recently did a documentary with National Geographic about how we can reduce our carbon impact in everyday living. So one of them was eating less meat, exploring different ways that we can change our diets to be more climate smart, or whether even if it's just environmental consciousness or awareness. There's a lot of things that we're doing that are impacting the environment, whether it's taking the car instead of walking, or whether it's sending out an email. It actually has a carbon footprint, if you can believe it. Never thought that, sitting on my laptop tapping away would consume energy in such a way, but it does. So fact is, we are emitting constantly, but to have that environmental consciousness of doing the small things in everyday life to reduce your carbon footprint is going to be helpful. And as I mentioned, it may seem negligible, but hundreds and thousands or even millions of people around the world doing something is making a huge difference. And planting one tree, that's already sequestering about 40 kilograms worth of carbon for a 10-year span of time. So if you can try doing that one little thing every single day, then it all adds up. So just do that and also get to know people. I think that's the best way that we can reduce carbon.
Yeah, I would just say look at what your strengths are and where do you want to put your effort and time, and also recognize that your advocacy work doesn't necessarily have to be your whole life. You can have a life in addition to that. I have children and they take my time and energy along with my job. And also recognize that it's a process. And so one thing is good, but making a habit of that is also good. And it will take time in order to solve this, but just recognizing that it's not necessarily a one and done thing, but just view it as a process instead.
Yeah, and just recognize the fact that none of us can solve climate change by ourselves, but if we all do something, we can have an impact, and that will be the way we address this and solve these problems. Well, I think our time's up. I'd like to ask for a round of applause for Martha and Louise.